Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Arctic Wire Rope and Supply, an Alaskan company providing lifting and rigging products since 1983. Manufacturing custom wire rope, chains, and nylon slings here in Anchorage. On the web at arcticwirerope.com.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is Tuesday, July 7th, 2015. And don't forget, you can always check out our weather information by going to www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can call our weather information line at 1-800-472-0391. And as always, check out our social media pages on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now on to the hot topic of the day. We do have some dense smoke advisories out for the central interior, the upper Koyukuk Valley, the Yukon Flats area, and also the middle Tanana Valley. And these dense smoke advisories are out for smoke that'll reduce visibilities down to a half mile or even a quarter mile or less at times. So be aware that this is out through the early morning hours of Wednesday, and that could be continued if the smoke continues to be a problem in those areas. And speaking about fire, the fire danger across the central areas of the state are extending out towards the Seward Peninsula. So a large span of the state is under areas where they can experience fire hazards, and that stretches all the way down into the south central area. So please be aware, if you're in these areas, try not to burn at this time, because even though we had some rain, we haven't had much improvement of the moisture quality across the state. So here we have the smoke visibilities. They reduce visibilities down to 1/4 mile for much of the day across the Bettles Airport area. And then what we're going to be seeing as we head into midweek is a cooler weather pattern for much of Alaska. Okay, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. And remember, the fire danger remains high despite of the recent rainfall. And the other thing to note today is we're seeing a gusty wind pick up across the Arctic coast, and they've already started to gust up to 40 miles per hour. So let's first take a look out towards the west, and here's the Bering Sea with Shimya just below the main center of the low pressure system. Putting this into motion, you can see it's just streaming some moisture up through the Bering around the main low that's located just along the western areas of the Bering. So lots of cloud cover, and looking closer to home, there's a large swath of clouds that are streaming up into the central areas of the state as a front pushed through earlier today. Now just take a look at this visible satellite is showing just a large area of clouds, and we had some rainfall across the area, and we'll get to those maps in just a moment. So over in the southeastern areas, you saw some breaks across near the Ketchikan area this afternoon. So the clouds are starting to move on in that direction. So looking at the surface pattern, here's the front that's stalled across the northern areas of the state. The low is very weak at 1,003 millibars. Some showers were developing during the afternoon hours across all of south central back through the southwest. However, they're not bringing much precipitation, as well as we're not seeing that much precipitation along the frontal areas, so expect up to 1 to 2/10 of an inch as we head through the early evening hours. And we have a high pressure ridge across the southeastern Gulf areas that is starting to break down and shift to the southeast. Out towards the west, here's the surface low pressure, 981 millibar low, with some shower activity around this low pressure system and a stronger wave coming across the central and western Aleutians brings some rain during the afternoon hours. Across south central from yesterday, we saw rain amounts across the Anchorage areas and just north between 1 and 2/10 of an inch. However, most areas only saw a few hundredths of an inch. Now looking at your forecast for tonight, much of the same pattern. The low pressure system over the Bering will bring this front further into the Bering towards the Pribilof Islands, and then across the interior areas of the state, mainly evening shower activity with the possibility of thunderstorms across the central interior to the east central areas of the state. So expect rainfall to continue across this weak front. Mainly the bulk of the precipitation will be along the western Brooks Range here, and then the smoke issues will continue across the central interior and out to the east overnight. Across the southeast, expect some rainfall showers across the panhandle, mainly towards Yakutat, with just clouds across the rest of the southeast, across the Gulf waters. One thing to note here is that much weaker flow pattern. The winds have gone between 5 to 15 miles per hour, so fairly light winds across the Gulf waters and Kodiak Island now. For your Wednesday forecast, not much change in the surface pattern. The low pressure remains weak, even weakens further as we head into Wednesday. So smoke issues will be problematic in the morning. Stay tuned for updates, however, across the central interiors as these fires, if they continue to burn, the smoke will continue to be a problem. Across the southeast, expect precipitation possibilities through the day on Wednesday, mainly as you head up north towards Haines and back over towards Yakutat. Otherwise, we have a weak disturbance that's moving across the eastern areas of the Gulf, and that might bring in some rain across the eastern areas of the Gulf, not expecting that to make it into the southeast for your afternoon. Across the southwest, mainly afternoon showers. We have a very moist air mass across the state, so diurnal showers and also some diurnal winds in most areas. The area that's going to see the most wind is an easterly flow, as this high pressure across the north forces a colder air mass in towards the coast. So we've already seen a colder trend across the Arctic coast, and that will continue as we head through your Wednesday. A stagnant pattern across the Bering as this low pressure just kind of sits and spins in place through Wednesday, brings showers across to the eastern Aleutians and more showers on towards the southern area of the Aleutian chain. Gusty winds will occur across much of the Bering just along this gradient ahead of the low pressure system. And then as we head into your Thursday, expect another weak disturbance to move up, pushing a front towards Kodiak Island. So could see some showers working into the southern Gulf areas with this low pressure system, but we'll have this low pressure across the southern areas of the state on Thursday. That'll be enough to initiate some shower activity, and we'll have to monitor that for thunderstorms, mainly across the eastern Alaska Range and north. Along the coastal areas, the winds will continue to be gusty across the Barrow area with rain for your Thursday forecast. And for the southeastern areas, mainly a quiet in between the two systems, some breezy afternoon winds picking up, and then just some light rain heading over to Yakutat. Otherwise, a typical summer day for the southeast. Looking at your temperatures today, got the warmest across a net reaching all the way up to, I think it was 81 degrees the last time I checked this afternoon, but mainly in the 70s across the southeast. Much cooler temperatures though across the state. As you can see, temperatures in the central interior only reaching up into the mid 60s for the most part today and all across the Gulf Coast. Now across the northern areas, a big drop. Dead Horse is dropping down to 40 degrees actually this afternoon, with most of the coast seeing temperatures in the 40s until you get back towards the Kotzebue Sound. Temperatures climbing here into the 50s to lower 60s, a little bit cooler along the Bering there. And across the southwest, overall temperatures were uniformly in the mid 50s across the Alaska Peninsula, and cooler temperatures in the Bering in the mid 40s to the mid 50s. Looking at your temperatures for tonight, expect rather uniform temperatures across the coastal areas in the mid 50s, with slightly cooler across the southwest in the mid 40s. The southeast will be warmest, with lows only getting down into the mid 50s. Across the interior areas of the state, in the mid 50s as well, with the coldest temperatures across the Arctic coast dropping back down into the mid 30s once again. For the Bering, expect to see temperatures in the mid 40s. And then as we head into your day tomorrow, Expect temperatures to slowly climb up across the Bering areas to near 50. So a little bit cooler across the west and the northern areas, only reaching into the mid-40s to the mid-50s back towards the Seward Peninsula. Central interior, warmest across the state expected tomorrow in the lower 70s, with the coastal areas of the Gulf getting up into the mid-50s to the mid-60s. Looking at your flying weather for tomorrow, we have a large area MVFR across the Gulf, and that's just clouds moving around and ahead of this low pressure system out to the west, with IFR across most of the Bering and along the Arctic coast. We'll see some IFR conditions also across the northern coastal areas, but that should improve in the afternoon as well as the MVFR. Now looking at your passes in more depth, the Anaktuvik Pass will be MVFR for most of the day with possible afternoon thunderstorms. Adigan will be MVFR with possible afternoon thunderstorms. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be MVFR all day, and then Rainy will also be MVFR. Windy will be MVFR, and we'll see Isabel go from MVFR to VFR later in the day, and Mentasta should stay MVFR all day. Tanita will be MVFR going to VFR, and Portage MVFR condition IFR on the east entrance, and then we'll see White and Chilkoot passes between MVFR going to VFR later in the day. Now the freezing levels tomorrow morning, it's strange this time of the year because we see warmer conditions across the north with the 6,000 foot level across the west coast and the western areas with 8 to 10,000 feet across the Gulf waters. Looking at your icing tomorrow, primarily along the frontal areas along the Brooks Range and above 8,000 feet there, and possible area across the northern coast above 10,000 feet, and then this large area across a low pressure system out west above 6,000 feet. Looking at your jet stream, we have this large troughing across the Bering, and then a weaker flow across the mainland with the easterly flow across the Gulf waters. Now, this low pressure system is bringing the strongest southerly winds along the eastern areas of the Bering, with southerly flow between 15 to 25 across the Gulf waters, light flow across the interior areas of the state, and easterly flow just off at 9,000 feet along the Arctic coast. Now looking at your 3,000 foot winds, very similar pattern, and then a very, very light southerly winds across the southern areas of the state. Strongest winds across the eastern areas of the low pressure across the Bering. And then looking at your turbulence to sum this all up, basically we'll see turbulence between 3,000 to 6,000 feet across the Bering, and some turbulence possible as we have the upper level disturbance in the eastern areas of the Gulf. Now in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out this morning. It's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December, such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in. And you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the global positioning system computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
Hello and welcome back to the show, and now on to the marine forecast. Just taking a quick look, the sea ice edge is just off the coast here along Barrow, some open water along until you get to Dead Horse, and then the ice is fairly close to the coastline. And then what we'll see in the coming days is still the warmer than normal trend, so a continuation of melting along the ice edge there. So the best areas, I think, for boating as we head into the next 2 days, you're going to notice is across the southeast and south central areas. Here you can see the winds are all under small craft criteria. The inner channels out of the south between 10 and 20 knots with a northwesterly as you head to the south at 15 knots. The outer waters will be out of the west around 10 to 15 knots. With the seas across the inner channels between 2 and 4 feet, the outer waters will be around 5 to 6 feet. Heading into your Thursday forecast, still light winds continuing, southerly flow up the inner channels between 10 and 20 knots, and a northwesterly flow as you head towards the south at 15 knots. Still a westerly to northwesterly flow across the outer waters with seas across the inner channels 2 to 4 feet and 5 feet across the outer waters. Heading over to south central, very light winds between 10 and 15 knots across most of the area, and then variable across the Sound and the northern Gulf waters. And we'll see seas across the Sound and the inlet between 2 to 3 feet, across the western areas of the Gulf 5 to 6 feet, Shelikof Strait, and the Barren Islands area between 3 to 5 feet. Heading into your Thursday, you can see winds are becoming lighter still, mostly variable across the area with weak pressure across the area. We'll see a southerly flow across the inlet. Inlet waters will see seas between 2 to 3 feet, as well as Prince William Sound. The Gulf will see between 4 to 5 feet, as well as the Shelikof Strait and Barren Islands area. Now, looking at your Wednesday forecast across the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit gustier winds here out of the southerly direction. 10 to 15 knots primarily, with higher gusts up to 25 knots across the Alaska Peninsula. Now looking at your Thursday forecast, a little bit lighter wind speeds between 10 to 15 knots out of the south to southwesterly direction, with variable as you head a little bit further towards the east, with seas between 3 to 6 feet across the Bering side and around 5 to 6 feet across the Pacific side. Looking at the Aleutian chain for your Wednesday forecast, a south to southwesterly direction and small crafts across the central and western Aleutians, even into the eastern Aleutians there. Seas will be between 7 to 9 feet across the chain, and 8 to 9 just south of the chain. And then looking at your Thursday forecast, more of a southerly direction across the entire area, with an area of small craft advisories across the central and eastern areas of the Aleutians. And then seas on this day will be slightly lower, between 6 to 7 feet across the Bering side, a little bit higher across the Pacific side, between 8 to 10 feet. Looking at your western coastal areas, we'll see small craft along the St. Lawrence Island, back towards just north of the Pribilofs, out of the southeast at 25 knots. The rest of the area will be south to southeasterly direction at 20 knots, and seas will be between 7 to 10 feet. As we head into your Thursday forecast, winds become a little bit more southeasterly. Small craft as you get towards the northern Bering at 25 knots, and seas would be between 5 and 7 feet. Looking across the northern Arctic coast, back towards the Kotzebue Sound, winds will be east and then changing around to the southerly direction near the Kotzebue area. And then we'll see a brisk wind advisory across the eastern areas, with small crafts across the Chukchi Sea area. And then we'll see seas between 4 to 6 feet. On your Thursday, winds will come down just slightly and change direction across the Kotzebue Sound from south to a northeasterly flow, and small craft along the northwest coast. And then we'll see between 15 to 20 knots over towards the east with still higher gusts on Thursday. Taking a look at your forecast one more time for tonight, showery conditions across much of the state except the southeast. They'll see a little bit of a break continue, except across the panhandle. A chance for isolated thunderstorm across the interior areas of the state with smoke advisories out through Wednesday at 6 a.m. The western areas of the state and the Alaska Peninsula, quiet conditions here with windier conditions across the eastern and central Bering areas ahead of this low pressure system that's bringing a front across the eastern Aleutians tonight. And then we'll see this front continue to make a slow eastward progression. However, much of the southwest will remain dry. The southeast will remain dry for much of tomorrow, maybe a little bit of showers in the morning, some patchy fog. Areas of fog will continue across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and back towards the northwestern coastal areas, with rain continuing along a weak frontal zone across the central interior of the state through Wednesday. Smoke conditions could possibly continue, so stay tuned for that. Looking at your forecast for Thursday as we head into the middle of the week, the cooler trend is going to continue across the state. We'll see a couple breaks in the sun bringing temperatures up across the southeast and the central interior. Otherwise, expect near normal temperatures with a showery pattern ensuing through the week, and this low pressure system across the Bering is going to be in control of bringing the short waves on over towards the southwest. So expect a little bit of patchy fog here across the eastern Bering also on Thursday. Well, thanks for staying with you. I'll be back for your forecast tomorrow. Have a great night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.